All right, today is finally the day that you're gonna see the video you've always wanted. You're gonna get to see me eat breakfast and do some chores around my property, and you can watch and play along at home. Just kidding, I'm not actually gonna do that type of video. I don't do those types of videos, but we are gonna be doing something that I've waited for a while. I'm finally gonna be planting some tomatoes into the wood chip garden bed. Let's see how that's gonna work coming up. Here's the Back to Eden garden bed that I set up about a month ago. It's breaking down, mushrooms are happening, soil is being formed. Nothing's been done to this bed except an occasional watering, some rain has hit it, and nature's taken its place. Fungi are turning cellulose and wood pulp into soil that we can eventually plant into. Well, the eventually is actually now, because we're going to be planting tomatoes into this. It's not going to be as simple as just transplanting garden tomatoes into soil, because you can just kind of plug and play and go and you're on your way. Here we have 6 inches or so of wood chips. We're going to have to dig down to the native soil underneath these wood chips. Then I'm going to amend it with a little bit of fertilizer to help buffer any potential wood chip concerns. Pop the tomato in and we're on our way, so let's get started doing that. Okay, we're going directly for the center of the bed. We'll just pull back the wood chips, quite a bit of wood chips. And if we get down to the soil here, we can find ourselves a little worm happening. So things are looking good in terms of depth. Yeah, it's probably a good 6 inches. For the soil underneath, here's how it looks. Pretty black. At this stage, it's just gonna be mostly normal tomato planting. If I was planting in my backyard where I have more of a gopher problem, I would put these tomatoes in baskets. I don't have a gopher problem here, so I'm not going to basket them, but I'm simply going to plant my tomato just as I normally would. And I'm just gonna top dress this with some normal organic granules. Nothing special here, no specific brand or percentage of nitrogen or anything like that. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You know, for the most part, it's just normal tomato planting. You're just taking one extra step and scraping wood chips away. Overall, I think the soil looks pretty darn good below the wood chips. And that's what's important. We're planting below the wood chips. I'm not planting the tomato into the wood chips themselves. We're going into the soil below the wood chips. And that's going to solve some potential problems that people tend to bring up when talking about wood chips and gardening. The wood chips are going to tie up all the nitrogen. Well, maybe that's true at soil surface, but then again, the soil looks pretty good. It's black, which usually indicates a lot of biological activity. I've supplemented with fertilizer that has some nitrogen in it, something like 6%. Again, it's not really important. It's just important that we get some fertilizer on there. I'll probably give all these plants a hit of fish emulsion at about the 1 month mark just to keep them going, so there's a little bit more nitrogen, but it's fine. Worries that I have here, I mean, honestly, my biggest worries aren't even wood chip related. It's more our gophers gonna find these and ruin the crop. That's a potential issue, but in terms of the wood chips themselves, I don't see this being a problem. They're in this little bowl-like feature, which kind of protects them from the wind, yet maybe enhances the amount of heat that they're taking, which could be good or could be bad for small plants. They're gonna have enough water, so it should be fine. So maybe I am creating a nice microclimate. I can definitely tell you that there's heat coming off of here, so that could be a positive for the roots. One potential issue that maybe will be a problem, hard to tell, hard to quantify if this is gonna be a problem though, are the acids and the byproducts of wood chip decomposition, like all the leachate from this decomposition going to affect the growth of the plant. Sometimes there's kind of growth inhibitors when biological processes are happening. Is that gonna hurt the plant or help the plant? Again, I don't know. Results are to be seen, but in terms of planting into this, initially I was like, well, this is kind of going to be a pain. It's really not going to be a pain at all. It's actually going to be pretty darn easy. The Back to Eden experiment is now officially gone from thought experiment to actual experiment. Tomatoes are going into the ground. I'll probably plant some other crops around these tomatoes, do some intercropping on the edges of the bed, because these are 5-foot wide beds. Tomatoes don't need 5 feet of width, at least at this stage of their growth. So maybe I'll plug in some other things like beans around here just to make use of the space. But we'll see how this does. I also have another bed right next to this, which is no wood chips on it. Same soil for the most part. And we'll see, do these do any better than those? Is there any noticeable difference to this? I'm gonna be kind of paying attention to the soil throughout this. Is it staying more moist? Are the wood chips helping hold the water in? We'll see how these results all work. So we've now gone from theory to testing it in reality. I'll keep you updated on results for this during the summer. Fast forward ahead 10 days later, and that's where we are right now. How have things gone so far? So far, I would say they've gone okay. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. The biggest issue that I'm having is some of the transplants that I transplanted into this bed are dying. I'm not exactly sure why that is. One theory I have is when you dig this bowl out of the mulch, it creates a sun trap or a heat trap. We've had like 85-degree days lately, and despite trying to keep these seedlings moist, I think what's happening is extra heat is getting caught inside this ring where the plant is the very small plant, and it's just kind of baking them and drying them out. Maybe you're getting some heat from the composting process as well, so the air temperature right here might be 85 degrees, but down here at soil surface or right above soil surface, it's 105 degrees. Nonetheless, there's been some sort of issue happening. Now, I do transplant my tomatoes very early, like at 4 weeks. I don't pot them up. I go straight from the 72 cell tray into the ground. I know that method works. I've done it before. There's a bed kind of right here next to the camera that those plants were transplanted at the same time as these. All those plants have done fine, yet these haven't. Maybe there's some acids from the wood chips that are decomposing the composting process that are hurting the plant. I'm not totally sure. Now, the ones that have survived have done great. This one here hasn't been replaced. It's doing great. It's growing strong. There's some down at that end that are growing very well. So I think the process is going to work. It's just going to be getting them started. I think if I was going to transplant into wood chips again, one thing I would do would be to pot up the seedlings, get a bigger seedling. So they're starting above the wood chips. Their foliage is up above the wood chips when they go into the ground. Mine are below the wood chips, and that is causing some sort of issue for some sort of reason. I'm not quite sure why. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I've been reading a lot of comments on wood chips. I've been reading a lot on wood chips. You know, the biggest concern people have is like, you're gonna have yellow tomatoes and spindly plants. It's gonna tie up all the nitrogen. I don't think that's gonna be a problem. I mean, one, this isn't a forest. This isn't the wild. I can manage this. If a plant looks yellow and spindly, I'll add fertilizer, right? Like, you gotta observe and pay attention and react. This is a trial, so I'm gonna try to do my best and adapt and try different things to make these plants work. So I don't think nitrogen lockup is going to be a problem because I can supplement. Nonetheless, I don't think it'd be a problem anyway because I've planted below the wood chips. The plants aren't in the wood chips themselves, they're in the soil which is below the wood chips. So any nitrogen lockup shouldn't be occurring in the soil below the wood chips because there's no wood chips in that soil to lock that nitrogen up. I don't know, is that meta? This is how it worked so far. I'll keep you updated throughout the summer. Here we are a couple of months later, and we have the 2-row comparison. This row was not planted with wood chips. It was in standard garden soil, and these plants are clearly larger, more robust, fuller. They're bigger overall. The stems are thicker. Everything about them is bigger. They don't have more fruit, but the plants are bigger. And bigger doesn't necessarily mean better when it comes to tomatoes, because if I compare that back row to this row, pound for pound, that back row actually probably has more fruit per piece of foliage. There's a lot of foliage on this row, but there isn't a lot of fruit. So we're getting plants that look huge, we're getting the jungle effect, but we're not getting the production. Let's take a look at the wood chip row. So if we take a look at the wood chip row, we have kind of scraggly plants. They're kind of mangy looking, yet there's a decent amount of fruit on all of these plants. Why is it? Why is one better than the other? These just seem more balanced. I'm not sure. Maybe this other row was too rich and that led to a bunch of plant growth. Too much nitrogen for tomatoes can be a bad thing. You get foliage at the expense of fruit. Maybe the wood chips kind of buffered any excess nitrogen that was here, and the plants just have enough, so they're more balanced. It's not a variety thing because I basically have the same types of tomatoes planted in both rows, so it's not like these are all hybrids and these are heirlooms. That's not the case at all. It really is something cultural. When I look at these two rows, wood chips versus non-wood chips, I mean, one thing I'm thinking of is tomatoes want poorer quality soil. Like, they don't need all this nitrogen, and they maybe want a rougher soil to actually thrive. I mean, these plants, mangier, yet more fruit per plant, more fruit per foliage on the plant. So I would say pound per pound, like, these are producing better. Now, these may come on late, given all this foliage. They could turn out a bunch of fruit and, you know, it'll be all good. But I mean, some of these plants here have zero fruit on them, and they've been in the exact ground the exact same time as some of these others that actually have ripening fruit. Now, if we look at the bed soil to start with, I think this bed soil was actually better than this bed soil. I think this is the worst soil I had out of all these beds, so I think the soil was poor here. Then we added the wood chips on, and I think the soil here was pretty good. So again, tomatoes maybe do better in poorer soil. I don't attribute this betterness, though, to the wood chips themselves. I really just think it's coming down to a nutrient issue. I'd have to talk to somebody who's more of a tomato nutritionist scientist on that, but I think that's what's happening here is we're getting balanced growth because there's actually more challenging conditions over here, less nitrogen, and the plant's growing more true to type, where here it's just a nitrogen pump that just wants to grow big. When I first started this experiment, somebody said you're going to have small plants with small tomatoes, and they were right on the small plant side of things. I do have smaller plants, but I don't necessarily have small tomatoes. I actually have a lot of tomatoes, and all these plants look healthy. In fact, they look very healthy in both rows. Planting tomatoes into the soil covered by wood chips, is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? I think so far it's turning out to be a good thing. I'm not saying it's the best thing, but I don't think it's a negative. So if you've ever wanted to try this, give it a try. Coming up this fall, depending on where you're at, or next spring. Thanks for watching the video. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.